All right, welcome back to the channel. So Errol Spence is demanding 2 or 3 fights in 2021, according to his father, the great Errol Spence Sr. And it looks like they may be aiming at Canelo Alvarez, Manny Pacquiao, and dare I say it, maybe, but probably not, Bud Crawford. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So this is a video that I'm gonna really like doing because I'm a huge fan of the Spence family. Specifically, I'm a big fan of Errol Spence Sr., the father of Errol Spence Jr., and obviously one of his biggest supporters and a guiding force in his life, a guiding force in his career. I've had the pleasure of having Errol Spence Sr. on my channel. I've had the pleasure of having multiple conversations with him in person, and let me assure you, as one father talking about another father, I learn a lot every time that I talk to this man, and you can see the fruit of his labor in his son and what just an outstanding family these guys have, overcoming difficulties, teaching his son to be an honest, straightforward guy, who's in control of his life. I could talk to you for an hour about the conversations I've had with Errol Spence Sr. and just how he raised his son and how he raised his son to be his own man. I'm just immensely impressed with that family. Have not met the mother. I'm sure she's a wonderful, wonderful woman. But this father and the son combination, man, I'm so happy that they're doing well. And I'm really happy that Errol Sr. gave an interview, or it was a quote to someone else. I didn't actually ask him myself. I've talked to him about some other things that I may share in the video, but in this conversation, we're going to talk about the fact that Errol Spence Sr. said that they want Errol to fight next year 2 or 3 times, which is very, very active for a professional fighter, if you guys did not know. So most guys at the level of Errol Spence Jr. fight twice a year. Sometimes if they're like Gary Russell Jr. and you got everybody and their mama ducking you, then you may only get 1 fight a year, which is your mandatory, right? But Errol, fortunate for him, he's not in the situation that Gary Russell Jr. is in, where boxing is just okay with either tearing your name down by claiming that you don't ever want to fight nobody because all you do is fight mandatories. But the truth of the matter is that all the voluntaries won't fight you. Nobody will volunteer to fight him. However, Errol Spence Jr. is not in that scenario because Errol Spence Jr. is not in that scenario because Errol Spence Jr. makes a ton of money in his fights, and he has a gigantic fan base in the state of Texas that rivals anybody's and blows away certain legends of the sport who were known to have little enclaves of fans that would support him. The guy that I think mostly about is Arturo Gatti in Atlantic City. What Errol Spence Jr. has going on in Dallas is bigger than what Arturo Gatti had going on in Atlantic City with this stadium, with this 40,000 person stadium. So the question is, Errol Spence Jr. had his car accident, but now he's back physically. He was he fell off the rails a little bit in his preparation for fights and his discipline, but that's back together. Now he's back moving forward. He's listening to his coaches. He's working with his fathers. He's back with his trainer. What's going to go on next for him, right? And when you say that he's going to fight 2 or 3 times, that brings on, who's it going to be? If it's anything like his last 6 fights, you're going to see very, very high quality opposition, because the reason that I have Errol Spence Jr. as my #1 pound for pound guy is because of the level of opposition that this guy is fighting, which, just a little bit of a deviation from the subject matter for a second, but that's what amazes me so much about the criticism for Errol Spence Jr., that people can look at who Errol Spence Jr. has fought, then look at everybody else and who they fought, and somehow come to the conclusion that these people are doing the type of work Errol Spence Jr. is doing. And they're just not. So not Canelo, not Lomachenko, not Terence Crawford, not anybody in boxing is fighting this level of competition, with the exception of a guy that got cheated, in my opinion, in the heavyweight division, Deontay Wilder, with his fights with Dominic Brazil, his two fights with Luis Ortiz, and his 2 fights with Tyson Fury. Those are all 1 mandatory and 4 very difficult fights against the top level guy. The only other guy that I know that's doing that is Errol Spence Jr. But let's look at what the next fights would be for him. You have the opportunity. There's the IBF mandatory, because I believe his last IBF mandatory was Carlos Ocampo back in 2000. I think that was in 2018. I'm not sure. I don't believe that was 2019. Oh, yeah, it was 2018. Because in 2019, it was the Mikey Garcia. It was the Shawn Porter. Got those done, right? So he's got an IBF mandatory that's coming up. There was supposed to be a fight between Sergey Lipinets and Abu Karov that got postponed because Abu Karov got the virus. And as a result, that was held off. So I think still Sergey Lipinets might be the mandatory there. So, he's going to have to fight his mandatory. The IBF is going to insist that he fights the mandatory because the IBF is a real sanctioning body that ain't playing games. Shout out to Daryl Peebles and the management of the IBF. That is just top notch. That that if Errol Spence Jr., despite his the fact that he's a big money man in the division, despite that if he is ordered to fight Abu Karov, or if he's ordered to fight Sergey Lipinets, then he's going to have to fight him or he's going to get stripped. The other beautiful thing in that scenario is that Errol Spence Jr. will fight him. Errol Spence Jr. ain't trying not to fight nobody except for maybe Keith Thurman, and he's got his reasons for that one, even though I disagree. So who would the next fights be? You got the mandatories going to fall in there somewhere, but 3 of them, Canelo, Manny, and Terence Crawford would be the ones that are competing for those. Now, who's the most realistic of those? None of them, quite honestly. Manny, I don't believe that Manny's going to fight Errol. I don't see it. I don't believe it. I don't think he wants that fight. I don't care what he says, because I think he's going to get mopped, and I think everybody knows that he's going to get mopped, and there ain't enough juice on the planet to get him up out of that, because he's not fighting somebody that is like a Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman coming off of a 2-year layoff and a subpar performance against a guy like Josecito Lopez, hurting him with body shots. The Riverside Rocky, no. Riverside Rocky gets mopped by Errol Spence. In fact, Riverside Rocky was on the undercard. He might be one of the guys, if he can't get these other dudes in the ring, that might get mopped by Errol Spence. Would be a wonderful fight that might go about 6-7 rounds, but he's going to destroy Josecito Lopez. Anyway, so Manny Pacquiao, that's a tough one. Terence Crawford, we know what's going on with Terence Crawford. And Bob Arum. Bob Arum is saying, Bob Arum just flips back and forth, dude, because Bob Arum ain't got no intention on making any big fights for Terence Crawford. I do not believe it. Bob says in one breath that he's losing money on Terence Crawford. Then he says in the same breath, Errol Spence Jr. is losing money for the PBC. If they're both losing money for their organizations, then why are you trying to make the fight, right? Obviously, they're not losing money for these organizations. No way. I'm sure any type of accounting trick, you can use all kind of accounting tricks to make it look like to turn somebody from a profit center into a cost center. They just claim like they don't have any value. And that's how they treat Terence Crawford, like a cost center. Like, we're not going to put any advertisement on him. We're not going to do all that. We're just going to put him on TV and watch people come watch him because he's an American black fighter. People are going to watch at that level, but that's not something that he wanted to invest in. Why do you believe that the fight is going to get made then? It's tough for me, man, to believe that. I think Bob just wants to coast Terence Crawford. Bob just don't want to do right, and I don't think Terence wanted to do too much right either, and it's going to be real tough to happen unless he goes over to the PBC. So the other guys are Keith Thurman, which Errol Spence Jr. said he didn't want to fight, and Shawn Porter, which is very, very likely. So one of those things could be Shawn Porter. One of them could be Abu Karov or Sergey Lipinets. And then hopefully the third, if Manny Pacquiao gets one fight, and by the time that the later half of the year comes up, that, there can be more people allowed into stadiums, then maybe the Manny Pacquiao thing can come about. But anyway it goes, I'm loving it. I'm loving the fact that these guys are past this accident, that they're past this fight, and that they're looking forward to the future, and that they're dedicated and training. And I think it's just going to be a lot of fun watching the rest of Errol Spence Jr.'s career as he comes up against, these guys that he's basically dominating right now. At this point, in my opinion, he's dominating the welterweight division. And, but then there's going to be the young guys coming up, and we'll see how that goes. The other one, obviously, is Canelo, and, that very well may happen, but I don't think it's going to happen this year. Anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think. And with that, I'm out. Peace.